Greetings and welcome to another episode of Diamond Dave Retrospectives, in which I, Diamond Dave, shall be reviewing all of my work during my years on YouTube. In this episode, I shall be reviewing my 2009 film Goldeneye 64 live action. Now, I grew up with Goldeneye 64, and it was one of my favourite video games of all time. I have so many fond childhood memories playing it with friends, and in latter years as an adult, when I dug out my Nintendo 64 and set it up all again, I would always replay GoldenEye because not only is it one of the best games of all time, it's also definitely one of the most addictive video games of all time. After years of playing it, it just never got stale. It was also one of the most revolutionary games at the time it was released as a first-person shooter. Now, while first-person shooter video games were nothing new, in 1997 we all had the likes of Doom and things like that. It was GoldenEye 64 that really set the bar for future FPS video games, just because of how incredible it was in its design and the gameplay and just how addictive it was and the multiplayer. And I actually played the video game before I saw the movie it was based on, because I was about 7 years old when the game came out, but obviously the film came out first. It wasn't until a few years later that I saw the film that it was based on. And as I said in my first episode of Diamond Dave Retrospectives, action movies like James Bond were one of my greatest influences in my approach to my own work. So whenever I decided that I wanted to be a filmmaker and I started out on YouTube for the first time way back in 2008, one of the things occurred to me: did anybody ever do like a live action parody of GoldenEye, or like do a first person shooter film but make it look as if it's like a computer game even though it's live action? So I typed in GoldenEye 64 parody, and would you know it, several results did actually come up, and there was one particular video. I can't remember the name of the guys who did it, but I remember the name of the video. It was called Golden Apple 64, I think it was called, and those guys did such a great job of capturing the essence of it being a video game, even though it's real life people in a real life live action environment. They made it look like it was the game through how they filmed it and the editing, and it really inspires me to do my own version of it myself. As soon as I saw that video, Golden Apple 64, I don't know if it's still on YouTube, but it was back in 2008 when I first started out. I just thought I have to jump on this bandwagon and do my own version because it just seemed too great of an opportunity to miss, both because it's a really clever idea to do a live action parody of a video game, especially a first person shooter, and obviously I wanted to pay tribute to one of my favourite games that I played a lot growing up. So by this time I was on YouTube for about a year now, and as with Practical Joke Gone Wrong, I wanted to try something new, and doing a live action parody of GoldenEye 64 seemed the perfect opportunity for my next project. So I actually got my best friends to be involved in this, because there were quite a lot of us together. A group of friends were quite a big group. There were over half a dozen of us there on the day that we filmed it. And as I said as I said in the first Diamond Dave retrospective, the more people you have on a film, the better. regardless of how many people you require to be on screen, whether it be 2, 3 or more. Numbers, bigger numbers make a better product in the end because you have additional manpower, so to speak. So I could have several cameramen because it wasn't important to see the face of the main character because it was being filmed through their perspective, so you didn't need to see what the person behind the camera looks like. And obviously, because we were doing a parody of a video game, we needed to have numbers of people to pose as enemy characters for the main character to go around shooting. Just like in the game, you have enemy characters on screen who fire at you and you have to fight them back. So I was very blessed in this particular project to have good numbers. Additionally, the location that we used was fantastic because my friend James's house is very, very big. This is where we shot it. It was at his family house, and it is like a palace. It's literally like a palace. Just one room of his house would take up an entire floor of my house. And again, I iterate that physical space is very important. Your environment where you're filming is one of the biggest priorities for physical space, for you to be able to have all the opportunities to take different angles from here all over the place. And his house was just a perfect location to double as a level from Goldeneye, to make it look like it was a proper level, like a big hideout for the bad guys to reside in, and for James Bond to storm in and kill all the baddies and do his mission objectives akin to the video game. Despite the fact that this was just a simple live-action video game parody, I did want to try and put a bit of a storyline in it, just because I'm obsessed with storylines and plot. So basically, James Bond has to storm the base, rescue hostages, obtain a drug plant sample, hack into a computer and steal some terrorist data, and then chase after me because I pose as the end level final boss. On the day then, I showed up at James's house with the camera, battery fully charged, and I also brought with me some woolly masks for my different friends to wear who were posing as enemy characters, and James has a horde of toy guns that we could use for the film. And we just waited for the rest to show up, and we basically got on with it. None of it was pre-planned. I did pre-plan how I wanted it to go, but most of it was literally making it up as we went along. And I think, considering the constraints that we had, and we didn't have the proper equipment like a GoPro or a camera helmet to properly simulate a first-person shooter. We literally filmed it like this. I would have the camera up like this and stick my arm out holding the gun to make it look like the game, and I would just move around like this, recording the camera with my arm stretched out. So, considering the rather primitive tactics we used to achieve the first-person video game look of the movie, I think we did a pretty good job, and I think it still holds up. Now, there are two versions of this film that exist on my channel. In fact, there are actually a number of films that have been uploaded more than once to this channel. A few films, there are two versions of them that are there on my channel, usually because I would want to go back and revisit them and re-edit them a bit, put new things in them, like a redo, so to speak, just to improve on the original. And this was one of those examples, because shortly after I uploaded the original version of this parody, I started a part-time night course at my local college in advanced video editing in order to hone in on my skills as a filmmaker and an editor. I wanted to learn new, more advanced editing skills that I currently has no knowledge of, because I was just working on iMovie over the first year of being on YouTube. Because especially the likes of Street Hero, where we have guns, but whenever we fire, there's no gunfire, nothing is coming out. We just do this, and then I put gunshot sounds over it to give the smoke and mirrors illusion of that. But for this one, I wanted to really step up the mark, because I was doing a parody of one of my favourite video games. There are a lot of guns involved in this film for obvious reasons, so I took the footage of this film to my nighttime course in college and used that to be my piece of work for that particular part-time course, as a means for me to be able to put more advanced editing effects into it, like proper gunfire, so whenever the gun goes off, proper actual gunfire comes out of it. I think it's called a muzzle flash, but my lecturer at the time was very good at teaching me how to put those effects in, and I'll touch more on that later on in the review. So for this retrospective, I'm obviously going to use the second superior version of the film that has the more advanced special effects put into it. So this is Goldeneye 64 live action special edition, and it was uploaded on the 22nd of May 2009. So this is an example of me improvising in order to achieve a practical effect. Now, for those of you who have ever seen a James Bond movie, you would all be aware of the famous gun barrel opening sequence that always introduces the movie. It has James Bond walking across the screen, and you're seeing it through the perspective of a gun barrel. He stops in the middle, bang, and then blood flows down, and the gun barrel sort of goes whom, 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 like that. So in order to try and replicate that as authentically as possible, for the gun barrel sequence, I actually put a discarded cardboard tube over the lens of the camera to sort of give it that tunnel gun barrel look. It was actually a discarded toilet roll cardboard tube that I used. So I had the tube over the lens of the camera, and I got my friend Ruben, who plays James Bond in this film, to walk across the room while I pan the camera with the cardboard tube over the lens, get Ruben to stop, he fires, and in order to achieve the blood effect, I didn't know how to put CGI blood down the screen, so what I did was I put a colour filter over the footage to make it turn red to give the illusion of the blood, and just like in the introduction sequence to each Bond film, I sort of made the camera go down like this. And as you can see, James Bond's dress sense is a lot less formal and a lot more casual. In this film, instead of wearing dinner jackets or three-piece suits, he's now wearing hoodies and jeans. Well, there you have it. So this serves as sort of the level introduction. It shows an armed guard outside guarding the base, and we have the wee subtitles saying what it is. It's supposed to be a drug storage facility owned by Big Bad Dave. Remember that name? And okay, so to go back to talking about the game, which this parody is based on, whenever you start a level in the game, the level always starts with a brief cutscene of Bond from the third person perspective looking around him and preparing his gun, whilst the camera pans over, goes behind him, and then zooms into the back of his head, and then the level starts through the first person and you pick up the gun. Sort of that interactive experience that you're supposed to get with video games, that you're stepping into the shoes and the eyes of the main character. And that's what I was trying to do with this opening panning shot of Ruben, who was playing James Bond. I sort of went around him like this, holding the camera, and then I just went behind him and slowly zoomed in and put in a fade cross dissolve, and then it cut to the first person perspective of the player, exactly like it is in the video game. Now, because it wasn't important to see who was actually holding the gun at all times, because it was being seen through the eyes of the player and you can't see the face, sometimes throughout the course of the film, it's either myself or Ruben holding the camera and doing the first person sequences. So depending on the situation and the type of scene I wanted to get, we changed in between either myself filming the first person sequences or Ruben. It just depended on the type of scene I wanted and the type of sequence. So this first person sequence going round behind the car and then engaging the guards in combat, those sequences were shot by me holding the camera, walking around, doing this, and I intercut shots of Ruben from the third person perspective to reinforce the fact that it was supposed to be him doing it. And whenever I got shooting the guy who plays the armed guard, I just shouted over to him to react a certain way depending on which body part was supposed to be hit, because in the game the enemies react in a different way depending on where you shoot them. They sort of wave their hands like this if you shoot them in the arm, and there are some funny animations in the game that they clutch at their foot if you shoot them in the leg. So whenever I pretended to shoot him, I just said, "Bang hand," giving him the order to sort of pretend that he was shot in the arm. And then I would go, "Bang foot," to give him the instruction to pretend to be shot in the leg. And then whenever it was finally time for him to actually die, I just said, "Bang fall," and then he just fell over. Now, the lecturer who took my nighttime course in advanced video editing, he taught me how to do this, to put those little flames at the end of the gun barrel to make it give the illusion that there were bullets coming out of the guns. He took an image of Google Images of a gun being fired like this, showing the actual burst of flame coming out of it, and he taught me how to cut that part out of the picture and to crop it over the frame that it was supposed to be in. So I would split I would go to the video and split a very tiny millisecond part of the video in, just to squeeze in that very brief flash of fire coming from the gun to simulate proper bullets coming out. And I would be able to maneuver it across the screen where I wanted it to be, namely at the end of the gun barrel, and resize and crop it. A very handy technique that the lecturer taught me, just to make the film look more authentic in its being a video game parody. And in the game, after you kill an enemy, their corpses fade away and disappear. So in order to achieve that effect, I simply started recording my friend lying down on the ground, asked him to stand up and walk off screen whilst keeping the gun exactly where it was, untouched. And then I would cut out the bit of him standing up and walking off, and then put in a cross dissolve fade effect, just to give the illusion that he fades away, akin to the video game. Simple as that. For those of you wondering, the software I used to edit this was Final Cut Pro, which had a lot more facilities than iMovie in order to do those more advanced video effects. So I wanted to make it really authentic like the video game, so I would have Ruben pick up different weapons throughout the level, just like in the game, picking up different guns and ammunition to use on enemy troops. So this is Ruben now holding the camera and the gun, filming these different sequences. And this is a callback to the facility level in Goldeneye 64, where there's a soldier actually standing at a urinal and you shoot him and he dies. So I just thought that would be a good callback to one of the levels in the game. And that was me doing a very interesting forward squat death on the toilet. There's my best friend James getting shot. There's my other friend Ryan, who played the armed guard at the beginning, playing a hostage. And this is the supposed drug plant sample that has to be collected as one of the objectives. There's my friend James again, and that's a very good fall there that he did. I really liked that one. Here's the money shot of the film, in my opinion. this lovely view of the sea in the background, and then there's Ruben looking like a badass holding the AK-47 over the balcony. It does actually look a bit like a shot that you would see in a James Bond movie with the weather and the type of location that we had. It was like a big villa, it was lovely. It's just like I said again in my first retrospective, location is always very important, and this house that we recorded this film in was just brilliant. The many rooms that it had, the big spacious hallways, the balcony, it just made it a perfect filming location, especially for a film that was spoofing James Bond. We all literally just had free rein to do whatever we wanted in this house in terms of filming, because there was just so much filming and camera opportunities given the amount of space that we had. So, simply put, take full advantage of the physical environment that you're filming in, because you have a whole world open to you to take full opportunity of your whereabouts when you have a camera in order to achieve an impressive looking visual product, whether it be film or photography. Now, this is me again, manning the camera and the gun. And if you look closely, that's a bit of a giveaway, because you can see the cuff of the white and blue shirts that I was wearing, which clearly shows that it's me and not Ruben doing this. Now, this was me trying to do the pause screen effect. In the game, when you pause, James Bond looks into his watch and you're given an inventory of items to select in order to use for the mission. Now, unfortunately, I did not know how to rip game footage off YouTube at the time, so I did the next best thing by sticking my video camera in front of the television set and recording myself playing the game and putting the pause screen in order to simulate Bond getting the hacking device out in order to steal the terrorists' data. Now it quickly cuts back to Ruben doing the first person stuff, because I appear on screen in a cameo as my recurring villain, Big Bad Dave. And there's no audio dialogue. The dialogue is presented through subtitles, and that's another callback to the game that this is based on, because there's only text-based dialogue in the game, there's no actual verbal dialogue. And that last scene there was recorded by Ruben's now wife, Hannah. And now for the part of the review which I like to call the final reflections, in which I express my final thoughts on the film. I really liked this film. It was something that I had really wanted to do for quite some time during my first couple of years on YouTube. I was very inspired to do this, both from growing up playing a game that is very special to me and watching a bunch of other YouTubers do a very good parody of it themselves, and I felt that I wanted to do the same. To make it even more special is that I made this film with my best and closest friends. Given that it was recorded at my best friend's house, the house is probably the best location I've ever had in any film, except maybe for the building I used in Vigilante, but we'll be covering that in a later installment of Diamond Day of Retrospectives. But it was so much fun because these particular friends of mine had no experience making a film before or acting. The other guys who I had in my previous films were friends who did at least have a little bit of history with filmmaking. My friend Danny, who starred in Street Hero, Goths and Chavs and Practical Joke Gone Wrong, was in the same class as me during Moving Image A levels. But for these people, this was their first exposure to making a film, and I feel humbled that I was able to show them this whole new experience, and they had a lot of fun doing it, shall we say. There was a lot of play time with the video camera, and I was getting a little bit stressed out during the shots, as you can see in this very brief clip. Now, a lot of the behind-the-scenes footage and all the stuff that was filmed is mostly gone now, but that was just a tiny excerpt of me starting to get a bit anxious and my friends in the background shouting, "Chill out, Dave, calm down." I always try to be level-headed when I make a film because I don't want to come across as being overbearing, but the reason why I was getting so antsy was because I was worried about the battery power running out on the video camera, which unfortunately was a very recurring thing that happened in my films. Like Street Hero, for example, originally there was supposed to be a scene after Danny chases me out of the playground in which Big Bad Dave grabs a civilian hostage and threatens the hero to drop his gun and to stop chasing him, and the hero complies and does it, but Big Bad Dave shoots the citizen anyway and runs off, which then leads into the final chase scene that you do see in Street Hero, but at the last minute the camera ran out of battery power, and that's what I was worried about. And it's amazing because there was definitely a lot of play time in between actually doing the proper scenes in the film, as you'll see in this other piece of surviving outtakes.
I'm a terrorist, nobody move.
Record the audio at the same time, or
Ryan.
when you should, like, while we
Put the money in the bags and get your hands up.
so we should go like,
This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill.
Hands on the air and get your hands in the bank.
Yeah,
Scores for the money. Give me the money.
Yep. I'm really glad that they had so much fun and I was able to give that to them. A good experience. We all had fun on the day, even though I was getting a little bit antsy. We have to get this all recorded because the camera will run out of power, and if that happens, I'll have to come back another day and get you all together again. Looking back on it, it is amazing just how long the camera did hold out for, because by a miracle the camera did manage to last long enough for us to complete all of the filming, despite all of the fun and all the messing about that the others were doing in between scenes. But it was a good day. I enjoyed myself. They clearly all enjoyed themselves, and it was fun for me to edit, and it also opens me to new experiences in post-production, because this was the first film that I edited on a different editing software apart from iMovie. This was the first time that I used something much more advanced than iMovie in order to put a film together, and I had a very good teacher who helped me show the basics of putting in very basic visual effects, not quite the fancy 3D CGI muzzle flashes that you're going to see in the next film that I review, but still good enough gunshot effects all the same, just better than pointing a gun and putting sound over it. We actually get to see proper gunfire coming out. But there are two versions, as I've said, on this channel. There's the original and there's this version, which obviously I consider to be the best version of it, so go and check it out in its full glory if you haven't already. The only regret I do have about this particular film is just from a technical standpoint, that I didn't have a GoPro camera or a camera helmet to fully properly capture a first-person narrative. But considering that we were running around with the camera held to our faces, with the other arm sticking a gun out, and believe me, that's a lot more difficult to do than you think. Considering that, I think that we did do a very good job in being able to capture that first-person atmosphere and spirit of the game. This was also a somber note for me because this was the last proper project that I used with my video cassette camera that I had used since my very first films like The Bloody Finger. This was the last time I used it for something major. I did have it for a couple of short videos that I recorded in late 2009 and early 2010, but I'm not going to review those videos because I don't think they're significant enough to involve in Diamond Dave Retrospectives. But this was my original camera's last hurrah, so to speak, and it ended its career on a high note before it completely just went flat and stopped working properly. So that was it, Goldeneye 64 live action. I had a great time reviewing this because I recall it with so many fond memories. I was doing it with my best friends, and I'm very thankful to all of them for every part they played in it, no matter how big or small. We all had a good time, and it was a laugh. But the following year, it was time for Diamond Dave Productions to go on to the next level, because I bought a brand new high-definition HD video camera. So stay tuned for the next episode of Diamond Dave Retrospectives, in which I will be reviewing Enforcer Butch, which was the start of a brand new era on this channel. So take care and be lucky.